The Baseball Hall of Fame class was announced last week. Longtime baseball writer Jayson Stark here to discuss a little bit about the class, but with Jim Thome going in, I wanted to get a little bit more on him. And some of the names that are in this class I found to be pretty interesting. Let's bring Jayson Stark into the conversation. He joins us now on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Jay, how you been, pal?
Mike, how are you, buddy? I'm good.
Doing well, and, this time of the year we got the Super Bowl, obviously, with the Eagles in it, so that has kind of overshadowed everything. But I thought the Hall of Fame class was kind of interesting, especially with a little local flavor in it. Yeah, Jim Thome probably not going to wear the P on his hat, but he certainly had a big impact to this team and that run that they made, even though that he wasn't really a part of it.
Yeah, I've said for a long time that, if you think back to the golden era of Phillies baseball, just a few short years ago, Mike, the snowball that started that avalanche was really Jim Thome. At a time, this was when the Eagles had built that last team that kept going all those NFC championship games and eventually to the Super Bowl. And it was all Eagles all the time around here, and the Phillies were an afterthought. Sounds kind of familiar. And then they signed Jim Thome, and it changed everything. And, if I could describe to you the impact of Jim Thome, I think back to he signs here, it was either late November or early December before the 2003 season. And now I was working on a magazine story, so in January of that year, I went to the King of Prussia Mall because Jim Thome was going to sign autographs there that day. And I was curious how people would react to actually seeing him in person. And here's what I found. At 5:30 a.m., there were so many people waiting outside the mall that security said, "What the heck?" And they opened the mall at 5:30 in the morning. By 7:30 in the morning, there were 300 people in line. Now, Thome wasn't going to get there till 1:30. It was 7:30 in the morning. Now, at 9 a.m., not a single store had opened, and the line for his autograph stretched the length of King of Prussia Mall.
Jeez.
That was the impact that Jim Thome had, and he hadn't played a game yet, and these people hadn't really met him yet. He wasn't here long, but I think the affection that people have for him and the impact that he had was monumental.
He's a first-time Hall of Famer on the ballot. Were you surprised that he was, 89% of the vote? To you, was he a first ballot, no doubt about it, guy?
If you're not voting for Jim Thome, what are you voting for?
Yeah.
What are you looking at? He was one vote short of 90% of the vote, and that's where he belonged. I have lots of fun little Jim Thome tidbits. The guy hit 612 home runs. It's a very short list of people who have ever done that. There are only 6 others. But how about this? This would be every player in baseball history who came to home plate 10,000 times and had a better OPS than Jim Thome. Here's the list. Are you ready? Barry Bonds, Babe Ruth, Stan Musial, Frank Thomas, and that is it.
Wow.
Mike. Sounds like a Hall of Famer to me.
Vlad Guerrero was so much fun to watch. He gets in on the second ballot, but he goes from not making it to 92% of the vote. I thought it was a huge jump for him. I'd like to see him wear the Expo cap, but it doesn't seem like that's the way he's going to go. But what did you think about Vlad going from out to 92%?
Every year there's some vote that I don't understand in the Hall of Fame voting. Vlad was it this year. He didn't make it last year, and now a year later, he shows up on every ballot cast except for 30.
Right.
I'm pretty sure he went hitless in between. It's just bizarre to me. How is Vlad not a Hall of Famer? I got lots of stuff on him too, but here's a little Vlad Guerrero tidbit. This is every player who played 2,000 games in the big leagues and had as high a batting average, on base, and slugging percentage as Vladimir Guerrero. Here we go. Ruth and Gehrig, Ted Williams and Stan Musial, Rogers, Hornsby, Jimmy Fox, and Vlad.
Wow.
Hall of Famer. Let's move on.
And he was so much fun to watch, too. I mean, I know that doesn't get you in automatically, but, I mean, to me, he was you had so much fun watching him. And the fact that, I mean, there is a little bit of mystique and nostalgia by the fact that you remember him being an Expo.
Well, he was here a lot. He passed through our town a lot. I know he got at least 2 hits on balls that bounced. I mean, he swung at everything and still hit .318. You'd think that'd be impossible, right? But not for him. And he had a supersonic arm. He loved to show it off. He loved to throw the baseball, even when he didn't need to. And he made so many throwing errors that it's the reason that, if you look at his defensive metrics, he's actually below Bobby Abreu, which would probably surprise people in Philadelphia, considering the tools that he had in the toolbox. But as you just said, a really mesmerizing player to watch for a long time.
Jayson Stark with us. Jayson, the closers are interesting. He missed by 5 votes last year, and then Trevor Hoffman sails in this year. There's been a lot of debate about Trevor Hoffman. What's your take on him and closers in the Hall of Fame in general?
Well, I think that was the whole debate on Trevor Hoffman. The only reason not to vote for him is you don't believe that closers should be in the Hall of Fame. You don't believe that relief pitchers should be in the Hall of Fame. There's a segment of the voters who believe that. They'll change their minds when Mariano Rivera shows up on the ballot, but not all of them. I'll be really interested to see how Mariano does. Look, I understand the limitations of the position. I understand that, even a Hall of Fame caliber closer only pitches about 1,000 innings in his career. I saw the note going around that Trevor Hoffman pitched fewer innings than Babe Ruth. And to me, that's irrelevant. His job was not to log innings. His job was to win the game. And I would never pretend that Trevor Hoffman was as great as Mariano. Nobody was. It's the best ever. But they had virtually the exact same percentage of save opportunities converted. They were the 2 members of the 600 Save Club, and their opponent batting averages were identical. And Trevor Hoffman actually had a better strikeout rate. In fact, a much better strikeout rate. So, look, I recognize what Mariano did in October, and Trevor didn't have those opportunities, and he didn't have that success. But if you're going to ask me what a Hall of Fame closer looks like, if there is such a thing, it looks like Trevor Hoffman to me.
Well, if Trevor Hoffman, the debate is because he's a closer, I guess Edgar is very close, but is he out the last 2 years very close because he's thought of as a DH?
Edgar's going to make it. It's taken Edgar a long time. And the fact that people looked at DH a lot like they looked at relief pitchers was hurting him. 3 years ago he was at 27%, and now he's at 70%. That's incredible to make that kind of gain over 3 elections. But he went from 27 to 43 to 59 to 70, and he's right on that Tim Raines track now, where he had a higher percentage than Tim Raines did last year. He had a slightly higher percentage than Tim Raines did with a year to go. And next year, I think it's clear he's going to get in. Recognize how many votes are now available that weren't available to us this year. It wasn't so much that we elected 4 players. It's 3 of them got 90% of the vote or more.
Yeah.
And 9 players on this ballot got 50% of the vote or more. Now, those 4 get elected. There are just so many more slots available that I think Edgar gets in. I think next year you'll see Edgar, Mariano Rivera, and another guy who we have a lot of fondness for, and more than ever now in Philadelphia, Roy Halladay.
Jay, has there been a guy that you changed on? Because to me, it's so fascinating to get inside the minds of the voters to say, I didn't vote for this guy, I didn't vote for this guy, I didn't vote for this guy, I didn't vote for this guy. Now I'm going to vote for this guy. Like, that to me is one of the more interesting kind of storylines in these things, is a guy that just wasn't a Hall of Fame for you for years, and then he became one.
Well, it's happened to me over the years, Mike. My philosophy is to try to evaluate every player with one question in mind. Was this guy a Hall of Famer or not? And if I think he was, for a long time, I would vote for him every year. Now I'm in a position where over the last few years, I've had more players that I would like to vote for than there were spots on the ballot. So I haven't been able to vote for a Larry Walker or a Billy Wagner or a Fred McGriff every year. But I have changed my mind on players over the year. I would guess the most recent is Bert Blyleven. Just so many people that I respect were voting for Bert Blyleven. I kept asking and researching, and I came around. So it does happen. I don't pretend to be the only man in the universe who knows whether a player is or isn't a Hall of Famer. It's tough.
Jayson Stark with us. Jason, you bring up Larry Walker. How about Larry Chipper Jones? He was the leading vote getter in this year's class. And you talk about Vlad Guerrero and how often Phillies fans saw him. Well, certainly Chipper Jones came through the vet and the Philadelphia a lot. Do you have any good Chipper Jones stories in the time covering him?
I know this is probably not a unanimous opinion in Philadelphia, but I really liked Chipper a lot. I loved watching him, and I loved talking to him. And, with about 2 weeks to go in his career, he came through our town. And, I went down and sat with him for about half an hour, and I'd done all kinds of research about the greatness of Chipper's career. And so I began to tell him some of this stuff that I had researched and, to help put his career in historic perspective. And what was cool was he didn't just react to it with a, wow, thanks, it's good to know that. Some of it had a deep personal meaning to it. Like, for example, Chipper was a switch hitter with a .500 slugging percentage, and he was in the 400-400 club, 400 homers, 400 career on-base percentage. When I told him the only other switch hitter who ever did that was Mickey Mantle, he actually got emotional because when his dad, as a kid, set out to help him become a switch hitter, he told him Mickey Mantle was the poster boy. Mickey Mantle was his role model. Mickey Mantle was the guy to emulate. And so he spent his boyhood trying to imitate everything Mickey Mantle did, and he knew everything about him. And when I told him that stat, I'm telling you, he got almost I would say a tear in his eye. It was really cool.
We're spending a little bit of time here talking about the Baseball Hall of Fame with longtime Major League Baseball writer Jayson Stark. The Bonds-Clemens thing, they're creeping. They went up a couple of points. They're on this ballot for the sixth time. Any thought of big-time movement for either of those two guys?
I know that a year ago I thought they're going to get in. Over the last 40 years, every player who got to their level, which was 54% with 5 years to go, had gotten in, except for Lee Smith. And this year, both of them kind of stalled. Barry got exactly as many votes as he got last year, and Roger got only a few more. But if you look beneath that, Roger Clemens got every last vote from voters who were voting for the first time, and Barry got all but one, and that's been the trend. I think they still have a realistic chance to get elected at some point, but next year will be the test. As I mentioned, we have a lot of spots on the ballots that are now open because so many guys got elected, and we really only have two likely Hall of Famers coming onto that ballot next year.
Mussina did not get in. Schilling, Vizquel, Larry Walker, Fred McGriff, Manny Ramirez way down, 22%. That's kind of Jeff Kent did not. He's an interesting name sometimes because of his power numbers and his position. But some names of the memorable names of the recent past that are now on the ballot not getting in there. Jayson Stark with us. Well, we have you here real quick. Spring training's right around the corner. I mean, the Super Bowl has a lot of people here, but the Phillies are, 17 days away? Does Matt Klentak have another move up his sleeve before they get to Florida?
Yeah, I always say when that confetti flutters to earth after the end of the Super Bowl, it's officially baseball season. So yeah, nobody else in Philadelphia would be thinking about that on Sunday night, but I will. And the Phillies are going to wind up with another starting pitcher. I'd be shocked if they don't. And their original plan, I think, after they loaded up on bullpen and after they signed Carlos Santana, was they were going to trade for someone. I've been told that they were making Nick Williams available, telling people he was available. And the idea was to trade him for somebody like him, some young pitcher with years of control left. But now, the way the free agent market has stalled, and you look around, and the entire class, every usable starting pitcher, functional starting pitcher on the free agent market is unsigned. They're lurking. Now, they're lurking to find the right guy at the right price. And I don't think they're going to wind up with Darvish or Arrieta. That's kind of fun to speculate. But if somebody else, whether it's Alex Cobb or Lance Lynn, or even that next tier down, one of those guys falls into their price range, Jason Vargas, I could see that happening. Or they could still make a trade. They could trade for somebody like a Danny Duffy if it's a big deal with Kansas City, or potentially Jason Hamill if it's a lesser deal. They have a lot of balls in the air, and I'm sure that at some point they will have a veteran starting pitcher to add to this mix.
Jayson Stark, great talk with the baseball just around the corner. We know the Eagles are in the Super Bowl, but wanted to certainly do that. We've got some great reaction on the text board to your piece. And Jayson was in Hawaii last week. We're going to Minnesota tomorrow. Just a change of temperature.
All right, slightly different.
A little different.
Jay, we will catch up during spring training, pal.
Hey, enjoyed it, man. Thanks.